Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? You know, Chad, the other day I was listening to a friend talk about a customer service experience that they had. And they said that they had called in and were surprised to find themselves talking to like an AI automated voice that was supposed to help them. And they told me, this is a direct quote, they told me, I wanted to get a human being and not a clanker. And I was thinking to myself, that term clanker, and I considered, what a marvelous time to be alive, that I have lived so far into the future that I have heard my first real world slur for a robot. This is the world we're living in now.
So I was going to say, what's a clanker? And you're saying that that's a slur for a robot.
For a robot, for artificial intelligence. This is the world we're living in now. This is real. It's not like if you're watching Battlestar Galactica and they're going on and on about toasters or something. This is happening in the real world. We are living in the future.
So do you think there'll be like organizations like the KKK sort of thing that's set up like bigoted against robots?
I would say absolutely. In fact, I would say that we've already had one.
Yeah, I suppose that's right.
The Luddite movement, which maybe you know started as a labor movement, and they were against things like the automation, things like the spinning jenny once upon a time. So during the Industrial Revolution, they thought that if we did things more efficiently, it would put workers out of work. And over time, we usually find out we just find new ways to work. Anyway, hey, that's not what this show is about. What this show is actually about is a town hall called the People's Town Hall. It's going to be held in the Carnegie Center on July 31st at 7 p.m. We're actually recording this on July 30th. So by the time, depending on when you listen to this, the town hall may or may not be in the future. Organizing that town hall is Trygve Hammer, who of course has been on the statewide ballot a couple of times in recent cycles. Most recently ran for the United States House of Representatives last year. And obviously this event is intended as I think is it fair to say it's criticism of Congresswoman Julie Fedorchak? She's gotten some heat for she's holding virtual town halls, which I think are fine for what they are. But she's not held an in-person town hall. A lot of people being critical of that. So, Trygve, my first questions for you are, one, is this criticism of Julie Fedorchak? And two, are you going to be on the ballot again challenging her this election cycle?
My wife said to make very clear that this does not mean I'm running. I haven't closed it off, but, you know, that's definitely, I'm nowhere near making a decision at this time. So, and really, this was just about the idea of ceding the public square to the people we're afraid of showing up at these things, to our physical security, or, you know, to whatever fears you have of being in the crowd. If anything, in this age of expanding AI and social media, we need more human to human, face to face interaction. And a good example of what can happen at an in-person town hall is, you know, in her last telephone town hall, Julie had a call, and she ended up talking to Mary Wakefield, who was able to point out some things with her expertise in the field of where Julie didn't understand everything that was going to happen with Medicaid. So you want that, and then you can have people in the audience who will respond to others' ideas, either contradicting them or agreeing or amplifying with an example. So it's just a better way to do it. And I think you bring forth more ideas. And the other thing is we want to show that it's safe to go out there and have these town halls. There's risk in everything, but I don't I don't feel afraid to stand in this crowd, and I'm sure there's going to be Republicans there, and maybe people who really, really don't like me. And that's fine.
So, Trygve, you seem like you're annoyed. It might be the right word. Julie did say this is a safer way to do things is to do them online. Were you maybe it's annoyed, offended? Do you think it's offensive that our member of Congress is afraid to be in a room with her constituents?
I just think it's strange, and it's a pulling back from the way things used to be. I think if you're conservative, you should actually really be hungry for politicians who do the things that have traditionally been done. And, I think it's something we really need to do. And she was on your show before and talked about what Doge was doing at the time and saying, oh, it's not the way I would do it. But that isn't a good answer, because that was Congress ceding their authority to do those things to Doge.
It's really interesting to me that you're holding this in Minot, of all places. And I think that's actually probably a positive thing for Democrats to do, because a lot of times when I see Democrats do things, it's on the eastern side of the state. They're not very active in this part of the world. And part of that could be that just Democrats been running into a brick wall recently in the last decade or so in elections in Western North Dakota. So tell me about the decision to hold it in Minot. Was that just the fact that you live in the Minot area, or was that, maybe, hey, instead of preaching to the choir in Fargo, we want to reach some people who are not voting for Democrats right now?
Well, you talked about that wall. I've been banging at that wall over and over, and you got to keep doing it until it starts to crumble. You might not see anything for the first few times, the first few swings. But you're weakening it. You're causing those micro cracks, and you want to keep on going on that. And here in Minot, we've gone from a handful of people at meetings we had a recent meeting of the Surf Valley Dems with 75 people. And we want to keep that growth going. And believe me, I have driven to Fargo plenty of times in the last year. I was worn out by the end of that election cycle just from that 4 hours down and 4 hours back.
So, Trygve, you have had to deal with, as Rob alluded to, being on the ballot as a Democrat in a state like North Dakota, where the Democrat brand is not good. I just saw some polling a few days ago, and the Democratic National Party's brand is underwater by a bigger margin than any major political party in decades, maybe longer than that. Is this part of just having Democrats have to show up? Is that part of what you're trying to accomplish here?
That's a big part of it. And the other thing is, the reason that popularity or approval has fallen off.
A man of the people. He's got a cat who's
a big reason there that approval has fallen off is because Democrats want to see some fight. They want to see people going out there and getting things done and pushing back. And they feel like they haven't seen that. It's been I was tremendously disappointed with Senator Dodd when the Democrats had the majority, and he's like, okay, now we're back to normal order. We're back to normal order. We're going to, he felt like we have to stick to the norms, which I would prefer we do, but you can't be like, okay, you can kick me, but I'm staying by, I'll only throw jabs. You can't do that. And the other thing is we've often got defensive, and you end up just repeating the other side's talking points. Instead of, doing the rope-a-dope, you need to be counterpunching.
I'm curious about that, about the counterpunching and pushing back, because I don't know that you're right. I don't know that I'm thinking about how Democrats have reacted to Republicans in the Trump era, thinking to myself, you've done nothing but punch back. And even before Trump came on the scenes, I remember people like George W. Bush was a war criminal, and Paul Ryan was pushing grandmas off the cliff and all of that kind of stuff. And it obviously hasn't worked for Democrats given the state of the party right now. And even to town hall specifically, one of the valid counter arguments that somebody like Julie Fedorchak has for holding town halls is we watch videos of them with other members of Congress from other states, and people show up and they're screaming, and it's just not. I mean, some of them are great, but some of them really devolve into screaming matches that I think we can all agree are not productive. So is that really the problem, is that Democrats haven't been aggressive enough? Because I perceive Democrats as being very progressive, and the public has just rejected their message.
Well, from my point of view, and I think Democrats around the country are seeing that, yeah, no one has gotten out there and really laid down the law, really pushed back against Republican accusations. So that's what they want to see. For instance, I have friends on social media who will, send something and it'll be talking about, pedo jokes. So I wrote a column entitled Redo Pedos and just said, look at this. We shouldn't be talking about this issue. It's everywhere. And that's better than just saying, oh no, he's not. Oh no, he's not. Because then you're just repeating their talking point, amplifying what they've said. And I think people are looking for a little more gusto.
So Trygve, one of the things that I think has happened with the Democratic Party is not standing for things, right? I mean, I think we're going through a time right now. The Republicans are still, what about Biden? But Democrats now for close to a decade, it's all been about, but look how terrible Trump is. And I think voters are saying, okay, this guy's terrible, but we like low taxes, we like these things, whatever. And Democrats aren't necessarily out there saying, hey, the Republicans just added billions of dollars to the debt while taking health insurance away from people. Do you think Democrats need to be, when you start talking about the counterpunching, is it part of it about saying what Democrats will do, not just how terrible the other folks are?
It is. And it's also, both parties, I think, have a problem with representation in Congress in that our system is designed and controlled by people who have never, ever experienced financial insecurity. I'm talking even like the people who talk about economics online and everybody in Congress and probably most of the people in media. And I think the working class sees that. And that's part of why they turn to Trump, I believe, is that dissatisfaction, that seeing that, it's getting worse out here. No one understands how I live paycheck to paycheck.
I think there's truth in that, especially when I see, Democrats, it seems like every time we're coming down the stretch of a national election, we get a steady parade of celebrities, Bruce Springsteen and all the Oprah and all the rest of them lecturing us about what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that's really hard. I pushed back a little bit on the counterpunching thing, because I don't think that attacking Trump, and trust me, I don't like Trump either. I think it's a dry hole. I don't think that's accomplishing anything. You got to remember, they impeached this guy twice during his first term in office. They were plotting impeachment articles within weeks of him being inaugurated the first time. And how did that work out? We ended up reelecting him. So I think Chad's really correct in that we need to be talking about issues. I mean, we need to be talking. One thing I think that has really turned Democrats off, and I know this is or turned the public off to Democrats, I should say, and I know this is touchy, is, every time I hear, when I talk to liberals, there's a stratification of sort of identity. And if you're a white male, it's like your problems have to take a back seat to everything else. And then you look at the demographic that's supporting Donald Trump, and it's a lot of young white males. And I'm wondering if Democrats can come to grip with that and acknowledge the fact that, yes, all of those historical things about white, straight males being at the top of the heap are correct, but that doesn't change the life trajectory for an individual white male voter who's having a hard time for reasons that are not invalid. I think Democrats really struggle to talk. They get lost in this grievance Olympics and just are not meeting voters where they are. It's like, we want to treat you as a member of a demographic and not an individual voter. That's my perception from the Democrats looking out. I think that's one of the cornerstones for why this party has failed.
And and there's another thing too, is a lot of the messaging out there pits people who are basically in the same class, that the person you are told, or you feel this economic anxiety, and then you see someone who went to college and they're paying off these big college loans, and you don't feel at all sorry for them, but you're both, that isn't the person who's causing your economic problems, not that person now who has to pay off those college loans. And that's a problem with the entire system. College didn't used to cost that much. And while I agree that we shouldn't have to have everybody go to college, and there's nothing wrong with trade schools or going directly to work after school, but there's also nothing wrong with going to college.
Sure.
We do need philosophers. We do need English teachers and people in the sciences as well. And it seems like a lot of voices out there try to pit those two against each other.
So, Rob has written about sort of the missed, maybe the not reading the political tea leaves very well by our congressional delegation coming to the state and selling the big, beautiful bill by having a press conference with the oil and coal executives. I think we all agree we want the oil and coal industries to do well in North Dakota, which is a whole nother conversation about national Democrats and how they relate to this part of the country. But do you agree that the congressional delegation, by not doing town halls in person, it's not just Julie, the two senators, and aren't doing them either, but coming out and doing a press conference with two really big industries? I mean, I think just the contrast of, hey, this is great for us, while also taking health insurance away from poor people. I mean, that just seems like it's teed up for Democrats to attack them. And it seems like the congressional delegation helped tee it up by having a press conference with those two industries.
Well, they played directly into negative stereotypes about Republicans. And even, I think they kind of further drive a wedge in when they do that to this rift we have in the Republican Party. And I understand, will any of them be at the Republican state convention this next time? I really don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen with that, because the party seems to be in control, at least the party structure, by a lot of these people way over on the fringe. And meanwhile, so we're going to have more action on a lot of things people don't care about. Meanwhile, over the next 10 years, the deficit is going to increase by 4.1 trillion, 5.5 trillion if they don't let anything from this bill expire. So we need to be thinking about that. 2001, we were on track to pay off our debt. The CBO back then estimated it would be paid off by 2009. And when Fedorchak got in the race, the debt and the deficit was the number one thing she listed the first time I saw her on television before the primaries. But right now they seem unbothered by that.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful message against the only problem with that message. And I say this as a Republican who used to argue about that, is I'm not convinced that the voters really want spending cuts. I mean, I think they like them when it's an academic question. Should we balance our budget? Oh, of course we should balance our budget. Should we balance our budget by reforming Medicaid? Boy, that's a trickier thing. Do we balance it by reforming Social Security or some of these other, big social programs that drive an enormous? I think that becomes a lot harder argument to make. It's like, we ought to balance the budget. Okay, what spending are you willing to cut? How much of this? Because you've said a couple times now about the system being designed and the system doing this, but how much of this is just voters? Because I think a lot of times we talk about these political trends like it's a top-down thing, like Trump is doing these things to the country, like Trump is something the elites or the billionaires or whatever is doing to this country. And I can certainly understand that sympathetically, but the voters voted for him. Yeah, I mean, he even won the popular vote, not a majority of it, but a plurality of it. But he won the popular vote. There's millions and millions of Americans, hundreds of thousands of voters here in North Dakota that like the guy and support the guy. So, I mean, at what point is it about the voters? I mean, the voters chose this.
Very much so. And a lot of that goes back to, I believe, messaging and money in politics. Right, you tell someone you're going to increase taxes on billionaires, and then the next thing you know, they're increasing everybody's taxes, or there's got to be some balance. A quarter of Americans right now work in the low wage economy, often more than one job, but none of them supply medical insurance. So that's some of your people. A lot of your able-bodied people on Medicaid are already working. They're just going to have this additional burden now of having to bring in something to show someone that, yeah, I worked 20 hours here last week. So it's really just created red tape, that the work requirement. And it's been shown not to work. Basically, people just drop out and they go to the hospital. They wait until they're sicker and they go to a hospital where they'll get treated. And then, the hospital eats it, prices go up, and then insurance goes up for all of us.
Well, and I think that's the ultimate conversation about these Medicaid cuts or slowing down of spending is it's not like folks that are getting kicked off of health insurance are going to stop getting sick. It's just that the rural provider is going to have to eat that payment, and it's going to cost us all more money to go to the hospital and cause our insurance rates to go. I mean, that was the whole purpose of the Affordable Care Act, is get more people on insurance because it'll bring down the prices for everybody. Has it brought down the prices for everybody? No, but has it slowed the growth down? Probably. I would say it has. And we have rural providers who are still in office. That's a complicated thing to say, though. I mean, you have Julie Fedorchak, who just gets to say able-bodied people should work if they're going to get free government health insurance. And then people like Mary Wakefield, who you referenced earlier, national expert on rural health, then has to explain, well, if that happens, this happens, this happens, and next thing you know, your rural hospital closes. How can you articulate that, Trygve, to people who maybe don't want to lock in for that long? They just want that lazy bum to start working to get free government health insurance.
Right. And that's part of that messaging thing I think Democrats have gotten wrong too, is if I don't go out there and say, well, these people aren't lazy, because that's just putting those people and lazy in the same sentence again. And the problem is, it is harder to explain. It's so much easier to slap a label on something else and say, you don't want that, than it is to explain a complicated idea. So after the last election, there was a big spike in people Googling, did Biden drop out? Those folks are making it to the polls, and they're not going to listen to an extremely complicated message, to the detriment of our entire society, I would say. Education, we need people who are educated. We need everybody says we need more civics education. I agree. And we need math education so that when you throw numbers at people, they don't, their eyes don't glaze over and they just push believe or don't believe based on the numbers they want or what they want those numbers to say.
I just want to point out that the premise of the People's Town Hall is that Julie Fedorchak and the rest of the delegation are not holding in-person town halls, but twice now we've mentioned an interaction between Julie Fedorchak and Mary Wakefield that happened. Sounds like a very interesting interaction that happened during one of her virtual town halls. So I think maybe we need to acknowledge that those events also have value. Even if I'm still in the camp that she ought to be holding person-to-person town halls. Do you think one problem, Trygve, because when I hear like, oh, those lazy people ought to be working, I think there are some people on Medicaid who probably don't need to be there. I think there probably are some people who could be working and who could get off. I think Democrats don't acknowledge that enough. And I think even maybe a better example of this phenomenon is illegal immigration, where Democrats just we don't want to call them illegal immigrants. We have to call them these other euphemisms. And if you're opposed to this, you're racist. And if you want to deport these people, then you hate families and you're just a cruel person. And I think the average American is thinking, but just sprinting across the border into our country is illegal for a lot of good reasons. And I think they're tired of hearing that this possibly couldn't be right. Do you think Democrats don't acknowledge enough? I would like to sometimes hear Democrats say, yes, there's fraud in these programs. Yes, there are people who abuse these programs. And talking about that is okay. It's okay to say that some of these people really are using the safety net as a hammock. And it's okay to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Now, I don't think it's a very big percentage of Medicaid recipients that are doing that. And in fact, in a lot of these programs, we forget to look at what are going to be the unintended consequences, right? Like there used to be with welfare, the work requirements or every dollar you earned in a job subtracted from what you got in welfare. So it was a disincentive to work. So, we got to look at what we do with that. And yeah, people shouldn't be coming into the country illegally. We need a robust work visa program for like the agricultural industry. And dairy farmers have been screaming about this for a while because they don't need just seasonal. They need people that can stay longer and work. And there was that dairy rancher down in South Dakota. In fact, he lives close to Christy Doan's ranch. And, he basically said on national television on a CNN interview that he couldn't make it without his immigrant employees. And some of them were undocumented, but he didn't think they were going to come for them. And I don't know if they have or not. And the immigration issue now, and the reason it's become so much less popular is that we have seen that the student, I believe she was from Turkey, who was one of 3 people who wrote an op-ed in the school newspaper critical of Israel. And I've read that op-ed, and it wasn't anything crazy. It was just critical of Israel and said maybe the school shouldn't invest in Israel.
I think I worry about that. As someone, again, I want illegal immigrants deported. I don't want masked bands of ICE people sweeping people up off the street and then sending them to El Salvador before there's any adjudication to determine that these people that were sweeping up were actually in the country illegally, and creating any perception that they're making these decisions based on political lines, like, this person has the wrong politics, so we're going to target them for deportation, is wrong, and I think hurts the overall cause of securing our border. Let's finish up talking a little bit about the town hall. Like I said, it's July 31st, Thursday. It's at 7 p.m. It's at the Carnegie Center. It's a beautiful little building in downtown Minot. Chad and I are familiar with it. We spoke to the North Dakota professional communicators there. Just tell us what people showing up to this event, Trygve, what should they expect?
They should expect, we'll kick things off with someone will introduce me. And then I will, I might have someone come up, just talk a little bit about, how government policy has played in their lives. And then after that, just start taking questions, and how we run it's going to depend on the size of the crowd. A smaller crowd, we can just hand mics out as we go. If it's a larger crowd and a lot of people who have questions or want to say something, then we'll probably get mics on either side and have people walk up to ask their questions.
It's an interesting event, and like I said, I think it's from the Democratic perspective, even as somebody who's not, I am interested in there being more competition in North Dakota. I think one of the problems with the Republican Party right now is they don't have to work for it very hard, and I don't think that's resulting in good government. But so I'm happy this is happening. I think it's good when citizens get together and talk to one another about these things. I hope it's not just Democrats who show up. I hope it's a wide, I'm sure you do as well. I hope it's a wide cross section of the public, and really looking forward to it. I'm glad you're putting it on.
Oh, thanks. And we do have some evidence that their Republicans are going to be there. So
good.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Thanks, Trygve.
Thanks, Trygve.
Hey, take care.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name is Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Just finished up with Trygve Hammer. I have a feeling he's going to run for House again.
You think so?
I think so.
I think so too.
I know he's not ready to announce it yet, but I don't think, and the thing is I say that not as criticism of what he's doing. I think this is fine. I think
good. This is what pre-candidates should do.
Whether somebody has political aspirations or not, getting the community together to talk about things is a good thing. And from all accounts, whether I agree with Trygve's politics or not, and I largely don't, never voted for him, but I like him, and I'm always welcome for people to have conversations in good faith. I think Democrats, I thought it was really interesting, his argument about Democrats counterpunching, because I agree with it to a point, but I think what Democrats are punching with is the wrong stuff, like a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that
particularly for North Dakota.
Right. I think if Dems nationally and in the state don't figure out how to message a vision for what they want to do, that's not just Trump is terrible. A message of Trump is terrible, that's already landed with who it's going to land with, right? I mean, it's not like people are still on the fence about this guy. Either they like him or they don't like him. So I think what people are looking for is, if they're a little bit squishy on Trump, if they don't like him, but they kind of like his policies, they need to know what Democrats are going to do. And I think leading on some of the things like healthcare, education, like the kitchen table sort of issues, and talking about those things is what they have to be focused on a national level. We talked a little bit about sort of national Democrats, billionaires. You sent me an article over the weekend about Dems sort of being the party of status quo, and I would go as far as saying the party of elitists. I mean, when I was growing up, Dems were the party of the working class. I'm not sure people look at national Dems right now and say, I see myself in that party. Dems have let the billionaire class make a lot of decisions for them. And I would consider myself sort of a traditional sort of establishment Democrat. And even I'm frustrated by this.
Well, not just the billionaire class, but the celebrity class, which I think is distinct from that. And I think even the academic class, where you have people in academia, and I love higher education, and I love all these things, but they live in a bubble sometimes. And they get so infatuated with these little. I was reading an article in the New York Times this week, and my wife and I were talking about this. And the premise of the article was about how men are struggling, like their social circles are shrinking, and they have fewer friends and everything. And that's a real thing. That's a real phenomenon. But the headline of the article was about how much this burdens women, about how men not having anybody to go to. That means that their social support is increasingly just their significant or their girlfriend and their wives, and how hard that is for women. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? I mean, like, we have a crisis of men, like this, we have a masculinity, like all these podcasters and influencers and everything, just spreading an absolutely toxic form of masculinity. Right. I think it's drawn them to Donald Trump. I think locally, you talk about people like Nick Fuentes and stuff, so sort of this very male obsessed fascism is I think the fair thing to call it. A lot of these things are going on. And yet what we get from, a liberal institution like the New York Times is, hey, men, boy, your problems are sure a burden for women. Shut up, I guess. I mean, I realize that's a, cherry picked example, but that's the message I think Democrats in a lot of times send, is that your problems are way down the list. And if they want to win back this part of the country, it can't be that way. It's got to be something different.
Well, and I think it's interesting, like the debt conversation. I think Dems have an incredible opportunity to become the fiscally responsible party.
Sure.
And when you start talking about those big expenditures, you can talk about Social Security and changing Social Security by talking about increasing the cap of what people pay into Social Security. We've talked about that. We can talk about taxes and how here's specifically the taxes we do to increase revenue. And then look if there's something. I mean, I agree with you that we don't do a good enough job as Dems to say that there are potentially problems in Medicaid and other things. I agree with Trygve that it's probably not as big as conservatives want you to believe in terms of the fraud and whatever, but it's not zero. It's not zero. And I think Dems need to understand that there is fraud and abuse in some of these.
It's not zero. And also, I think that it's a bigger problem that a lot of progressives and liberals would like to believe it is.
Sure, we should figure out what the fact is, right? I mean, And
it is. These are big, complicated programs, though, and it's tough, and it's hard because, again, you try to reform any of it, and it's all hell's going to break loose.
And Dems have these litmus tests for each other, and I think it might end up being problematic as Dems are looking at endorsing a candidate in 2028. Like, you have to be perfect on LGBTQ, you have to be perfect on abortion. We're okay with people not being great on issues related to working people, though. We're okay with folks maybe not being perfect on public education, from my perspective. I think the days of Dems endorsing a white, straight male candidate for president may be over. So I think that we're narrowing our pool of potential candidates and having these litmus tests that you have to be perfect on. And if you're not, the problem is if you're not perfect, then you're evil, right? I mean, it goes from, if you're with me 95% of the time, it's that 5% that I think you're evil. And I think Dems have this idea, this problem of circular firing squads. And rather than focusing on the things we have in common, focusing on the things that divide us.
It's really interesting too when I see Democrats sort of pick the avatars that are going to appeal for them and it's somebody like a Tim Walz, which, I'm sorry, appeals to, I mean, it's like, well, he's a white straight guy from Minnesota, therefore all the rubes out in flyover country are going to love him. But he's a very progressive guy.
Right.
In fact, I would argue even now in the very, very early running, when you sort of look at the galaxy of people, is one of the most progressive potential candidates for 2028. His politics are very far to the left from where a lot of the voters Democrats want to reach are. And so if that's the guy that is going to reach out, I mean, Tim Walz owes his election to Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Right. And I think what's really interesting about Tim Walz is, one, I like Tim Walz a lot.
Sure.
Maybe for many of the things you just described him, but when he was representing a more rural district in Congress, he was far more moderate. But his base changed. His base changed when he was running for statewide office. And you're right, Minneapolis and St. Paul is the base of the Democratic Party in Minnesota. It was not the base of his congressional district in southern Minnesota. So I don't know. The other thing that I think is interesting going on nationally, if you recall in 2024, there was a Senate race in Nebraska where an independent ran, Dan Osborne. He was a union guy and whatever, and gave Deb Fischer sort of a run for her money. And it looks like he's thinking about running again. There's a guy in South Dakota, last name Bangs, who ran as a Democrat, I think against Thune, is now running as an independent, I think against Rounds, and then an independent also running in Idaho. All three of these guys are veterans. All three of these guys are working class. So I kind of like the idea that maybe moderates, maybe left of center moderates, are looking at a different path here that allows them to distance themselves from some of the national garbage, but still talk about things like public education and healthcare and all those different things. And
I think what they have to be careful with there is that their independence is a gimmick.
Right.
And I think that's the problem, like here in North Dakota, that Karaman ran into.
And Rick Becker, for that matter.
And Rick Becker, where they sort of, it was opportunism.
Right.
As opposed to a genuine, I'm in the middle. I think both of these parties are extreme. I don't think either of them really had the credibility to talk about it that way.
Right.
And
I think that the Nebraska case worked well because the guy had never run for office before.
Sure.
Right. And so he was sort of an independent. Bangs in South Dakota, I think it's more difficult when you've ran as a Democrat in the past and now try to run as an independent.
In fact, and we brought up, I mean, I think Karamund is important for this discussion because she hadn't run for office before. The first time she ran as an independent, but the context for her run, and we could talk about what degree, how involved she was, or the people supporting her were, but the Democrats pushed aside their U.S. House candidate for her. I mean, there's no question about that. And I think that made her I think that hurt her.
I agree 100%. I think that hurt her.
I think that made her claims to independence look just completely false. Like this was just a pretext. And the person they pushed aside is exactly the sort of moderate working class Democrat. Now, do I think Mark Haugen had a chance in hell of winning? He did not. And I think even Mark would probably admit that. But he is economically a very progressive. I mean, he's a very sort of old school Catholic Democrat. And the reason he got sort of poleaxed is because he had traditionally Catholic Democratic views on social issues like gay marriage and abortion. And I think Democrats I think he would have been just fine from a Democratic perspective in Congress. There's probably going to be a few votes, but for the most part, those are the abortion issues in the courts now, and the courts have done what they've done. So I guess it's back in the legislature now, but and
you said something interesting to me, Rob. You said Mark would agree that he was likely going to lose that election. Right. And that actually makes me even more impressed with Mark, because I think you're right. And he ran because he was a team player, and then his team completely screwed him over.
And now he's a Republican, which maybe progressives will look at that and say, oh, we rooted him out. He was disloyal, be gone. I mean, that's kind of the reaction I've seen when I reported on the fact that he had switched parties. The reaction was like, good riddance. And I'm like, great. Yeah. Just keep narrowing. Like your base can't get any narrower. Keep narrowing it.
We have a lot of perfect progressives in this state who have been able to get 25, 28% in an election.
Yeah. That's not working. And we can extrapolate that and say nationally, it's not working.
Right. No, and I think that's right. And obviously there are values that Democrats have that you need to stand up for. But I think you can also have values and not lead with your chin all the time, right? You don't have to always lead on things that maybe aren't popular to the people you have to appeal to, right? I mean, we know what North Dakotans care about. North Dakotans do care about debt. I mean, they understand debt. Kent Conrad when he ran, he talked about debt. He talked about debt the whole time he was in Washington. That's not just a Republican value. That's a Democrat value too. And I think people should talk more about that. And I think Trygve's point that Fedorchak led off her campaign talking about how important bringing down the debt was, and then her first big vote increases the debt by billions of dollars. I'm sorry. People should be held to account for that.
And even some of the cuts that are in it are postponed or delayed until after the election.
Right.
So who knows if those are actually going to happen. And they're cuts that you don't want to happen anyway, Chad.
I know. But that's the problem. Like they're saying, take your medicine. We got to give these tax cuts. And in order to do it, the poor people have to take their medicine. But then it's not until after the election because they know it's politically unpopular. I mean,
I would find it really appealing if Democrats would say everybody's got to take their medicine. Like rich people have to pay more into Social Security. Also, we're going to have to get tough on who's collecting Medicaid because there's a lot of people on these programs that shouldn't be there. I think if you could combine all worlds, and then on some of these culture issues, Republicans for a while, were calling them. There was kind of a talking point there for a hot minute where they're calling them 80-20 issues. Like just 80% of the public's against you. And listen, I of all people can appreciate that there is some nobility in tilting at windmills. God knows that I tilt at enough of them myself. Everybody thinks I'm wrong, but I don't. And I'm just going to lock my position. But also I'm not on the ballot. And there's a way you can de-emphasize some of those issues. And I'm talking about like trans athletes in sports. You are just, the majority of Americans are against you. And on that one, I kind of think they're right. I don't think it's fair for somebody to, switch genders for whatever reason they're switching genders. Even if it's authentic, you still have a massive competitive. It's hard for people to look at that and think that's fair. It's really, really hard.
The problem is that person changed genders. The vast majority of this is people who are doing it for the right reason, not in order to win a sporting event. Sure. And now we're saying that person, being their true person, can't compete in amateur athletics. Amateur athletics.
But I think there's a way. I mean, some of this is, sure, it's amateur, but it's also pretty big league. I mean, when you're talking about like Division I, even like swimming.
Well, but now when you talk about collegiate, I think it's hard to call them amateur at this point. So.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, we're literally paying them now. Yeah. NDSU just announced that, right? Where they're going to be. Anyway, I think there's a way to navigate that, to be respectful to the trans community and want to support, which I want. They're human beings. They're American citizens. I want them to feel welcome here. I want them to be able to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, the same as any of us. While also saying, you know, we have to acknowledge the fact that your circumstance, your signing up for basketball or swimming or whatever it is, you took a different path here than all these other people. And we're going to have to figure out a way to handle that. And it may be that you're just not allowed to compete. And that sucks maybe, but I don't know how else to handle it. How do you be fair? But we get down in the weeds on issues like that, and Republicans win on them. Republicans beat the tar out of Democrats on those issues because Democrats aren't willing to acknowledge there may be a reason to oppose this that doesn't have anything to do with hating trans people.
Right. Yep. No, that's right. I mean, and those issues are tough, and those are the kind of issues that people are so passionate about it. It's just a super minority of people who are so passionate about it, right?
Right, but yet culturally. I mean, Donald Trump running that video of Kamala Harris talking about taxpayer-funded sex changes, whatever it was, demolished her.
But that's what I'm saying is on the left. I mean, the people who trans issues are the most important issue. They're very passionate about that being the most important thing for Dems to fight for. It's just there's not that many of them, and so it's
but that's where it comes from Democrats, I think, listening sometimes to the wrong constituencies. They're listening to celebrities. They're listening to Twitter influencers.
But they're also listening to the mom of a kid who's not allowed to compete in sports, right? I mean, that's the hard part. I mean, again, balancing the value with the political reality of sometimes you are tilting at windmills.
Yeah. And also, I mean, this is not real for all we talk about it. This is not an issue that impacts most Americans.
Right.
Most people are not trans, and most people are never going to have a kid competing against a trans person. And I understand it's important for the people it's important to, but holy cow, pick our battles maybe sometimes. All right, we're going to wrap.
Rob, I want to tell a quick story about loving North Dakota. So last Thursday, as you know, I made my coaching debut of my son's baseball team, and I think you spent some time coaching your kids' team.
I was only the assistant coach, so I was crowd control in the dugout.
Yeah, I signed up to be assistant coach and ended up being the manager, and it was an incredible experience. And my son Evan very much loved to have people come and watch him play baseball. And as you know, there's a third person that we're on a text thread with who loves baseball as well, and that's Governor Kelly Armstrong. My son saw Kelly probably a couple months ago and asked Kelly to come to one of his baseball games. The governor, at one point, probably a month ago, told Erin, my wife, and said, if I don't make it to one of Evan's games, it's not because I'm a bad guy. It's because his parents haven't given me the schedule. On Thursday was the last game of the season. The governor of North Dakota showed up to watch my kid play baseball because my kid had asked him to do that. Came in the dugout, talked to all the kids, took pictures, gave them a pep talk and all that stuff. And I would suggest only in North Dakota. Yeah. No security. He was just another dad who was there watching a bunch of kids play baseball because he loves baseball and he was so good with the kids. And so we spend a lot of time being critical of politicians on the show because it's sort of the nature of the beast. But shout out to Kelly Armstrong and so many people who just care about this state. And so it meant a lot to our family. It meant a lot to the kids. I mean, frankly, they were like, I can't believe the government showed up to our game today.
I think that if we could survey the public, there's probably a lot of other people who have stories like that about Kelly Armstrong, and probably some of our other elected officials too, because we've had a lot of good people, right and left. A lot of good people. North Dakota is a special place in that way, and that we can really be connected to our elected officials. And that's why I get frustrated sometimes with the people who go over the top with the town halls and screaming and shouting. You're making it harder. You're making them less accessible. I do think Julie Fedorchak, I mean, it's hard to say that she's wrong when she talks about security and whether or not an in-person town hall would be even beneficial when you look at the video of some of the things that are happening.
And think about what happened in Minnesota, right? I mean, it's terrible to think about that, but it is a more dangerous place for elected officials.
Yeah. So I want to, it was just a few years ago, Senator Kevin Cramer, there was a guy that put hands on Kevin Cramer at a town hall. I think he was trying to stuff money down his shirt or something, make some political point that way, but completely inappropriate. and you make the case for them. I mean, they're human beings. They have families and people that love them. If your intention is to go to a town hall and be disruptive and scream or shout or even certainly be violent, just don't go. Do us all a favor and stay home if that's what you're going to do. And let the people who just want to come and ask questions and have a genuine conversation, let them do it. And I hope that's how Trygve's event goes off as well. I hope it's not. I hope nobody shows up. I don't think they are, but all right, we're going to put a pin in there. Thank you so much for listening once again. Remember, you can always follow our show at Plain Talk ND on Twitter, X, I guess we're calling now, YouTube.
Liberal. No, what are you? If you call it X, are you a liberal or are you a crazy?
If I call it X, then I'm like an Elon Musk fan. Although Elon Musk is,
hard to keep track.
Hard to keep track of where he's going. Anyway, you can follow us on all the things that way. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. Everybody thinks I'm wrong, but I don't.